Hi, boys and girls. Miss Kathy here from Shaler North Hills Library, and we have another episode of Greek Myth Mania. So, if you are excited about the gods of Greek mythology, this is the program for you. We are going to get Greek gods for you. And the two we are doing this week, well, kind of three. Two that are gods and one that is the daughter of a god. Demeter, Persephone, and Hermes on week 4. Hopefully you printed out the packet of papers so you can go along and do some of these activities with us or on your own. And I'm going to again be reading from the Dolores My Old Beat Up Copy Greek Myth Book. If you want to follow along, the website is given in that packet that you can read along with us, or you can just sit back and listen. First one we're going to do is Hermes on page 50, if you want to find it online. And we have a herd of cows there. I wonder what that means. Hermes, merriest of the Olympians, was the god of shepherds, travelers, merchants, thieves, and all others who lived by their wits. His mother Maya, a Titan's daughter, remember the Titans from way back in the beginning with Gaia and Cronus and Rhea and all of the beginning characters we read about, lived in a cave on lofty Mount Silene, a cave so deep that Hera never knew that Maya was one of Zeus's wives. Remember, Hera is very jealous and will hunt you down if she thinks you're in love with her husband. Maya had therefore borne her son Hermes in peace. Hermes was very precocious, even for a god. His mother had hardly wrapped him and put him in a basket when he began to think of mischief. As soon as she had fallen asleep, he wiggled out of his wrappings and tiptoed out of the cave. In the dark of night, he toddled straight to the pasture where Apollo, one of the other Olympian gods we haven't read about yet, kept a large herd of white cows. Apollo liked music better than cows, and he did not even notice that Hermes stole into the pasture and picked out the 50 best cows. To keep Apollo from knowing who had stolen his herd and which way they had been driven, Hermes slyly wrapped their hooves with bark to disguise their prints and tied brooms to their tails so that they would erase their own tracks. To confuse Apollo even further, he drove the cows backward out of the pasture and tied bundles of branches to his own little feet so it looked as if a giant had led something into the pasture, but nothing out. He hurried home to Mount Silene and hid the stolen cows in a grove. 2 of them he sacrificed to the 12 Olympian gods, not forgetting to include himself as the 12th. Then he took the entrails of the sacrificed cows, that's the inside part, made 7 strings of them and strung them tautly across an empty tortoise shell. When he plucked the strings, they made lovely music. He had invented the first lyre. Looks kind of like a harp, but smaller. Pleased with himself, he hid the lyre under his arm and tiptoed back into the cave. He climbed into his basket, closed his eyes, and pretended to be sound asleep. But he did not fool his mother. She knew what he had been up to. You can never fool a mom. And there's a picture of what a lyre looks like. "Shame on you," she said, "sneaking out at night and stealing Apollo's cows." "Why, mother," said Hermes, "I did what I had to do for you and for me. We don't want to live in this dark cave forever. Soon I will be seated on high Olympus as one of the 12 great gods, and you too will live there in glory as my mother." Then he pulled out his lyre and played his mother to sleep with a lullaby. At dawn, Apollo stormed into the cave where Hermes lay in his basket, pretending to be asleep. But Apollo wasn't fooled. An oracle had told him, that's like a prophet teller, who had stolen his herd, and he jerked little Hermes out of his crib and commanded him to return the cows at once. "How could I have stolen your cows?" Hermes whimpered. I am only a newborn babe. I don't even know what a cow is. Look for yourself, and you can see that there is not a single cow hidden in this cave." "You're not only a thief, but a liar as well," raged Apollo, and chased Hermes out of the cave and straight up to Olympus. All the gods burst out laughing when they saw innocent-looking little Hermes running with furious Apollo at his heels. "Tell this thief and liar to give me back my cows at once," said Apollo to their father Zeus. "Tell my big brother to stop bullying me. I am a newborn and helpless infant, and I am not a liar," said Hermes. "There isn't a cow in my mother's cave." "If they are not in the cave, then show Apollo where they are," said Zeus, and hid a smile in his beard. He was proud of both his sons and wanted them to be friends. Hermes had to obey his father, and without any more tricks, he led his brother to the woods where the cows were hidden. Apollo forgave him, but when he counted his cows and found that 2 were missing, his anger flared again. Hermes had expected this and quickly pulled out his lyre and began to play. Apollo listened spellbound to the beautiful sounds from the new musical instrument, and he quite forgot his anger. As the god of music, he must have the lyre, and he offered Hermes his whole herd in exchange for the instrument. Hermes drove a hard bargain, and Apollo had to give him his magic wand as well. From then on, the 2 brothers were the best of friends. Never again did Hermes steal, though he was the god of thieves. He never told a lie, but he didn't always tell the whole truth. His mother, Maya, had no further reasons to be ashamed of him. As the mother of one of the 12 great Olympians, she moved up with him to the glory of Olympus. Zeus was so delighted with Hermes' ready wit that he made him the herald of the gods. He gave him a golden hat with wings, a pair of winged sandals, and a cape under which he could hide his magic tricks. In a flash, he could move from place to place. He put glib words on the tongues of politicians and helped merchants close good bargains. He was as popular among mortals as he was among the gods. Even Hera was fond of him. She had been really angry with him only once, and that was when he had killed her 100-eyed servant Argus. Then she was so furious that she demanded he be punished and called all the great and minor gods to sit in council and judge him. Each god was given a pebble and told to cast his vote according to his decision. Those who found Hermes guilty of a crime were to throw their pebbles at Hera's feet. Those who found him innocent were to throw their pebbles at his feet. Hermes talked well in his own defense. Was it a crime to bore someone to death, he asked. After all, that was what he had done to Argus. The gods applauded, and so many threw their votes to Hermes that he was completely buried in a heap of pebbles. Ever after, travelers put up piles of stones along the roads, and they have believed that Hermes stands inside, helping them find their way. These were the first cairns, which is almost like a little mini temple to a god. Hermes also guided those who set off on their last voyage. He touched the eyes of a dying man with his magic wand and led him down to Hades in the underworld. So he was the messenger god, and known for his swiftness, with wings on his hat and wings on his shoes. Very good trickster as well. And he enters into the story of Demeter and Persephone. This is now on page 58. The only one we skipped over in between was Hades. We did him a prior week, and now he's going to enter into these stories about Demeter and Persephone as well. Persephone grew up on Mount Olympus, and her gay laughter rang through the brilliant halls. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her mother loved her so dearly she could not bear to have her out of her sight. When Demeter sat on her golden throne, her daughter was always on her lap. When she went down to earth to look after her trees and fields, she took Persephone. Wherever Persephone danced on her light feet, flowers sprang up. She was so lovely and full of grace that even Hades, who saw so little, noticed her and fell in love with her. He wanted her for his queen, but he knew that her mother would never consent to part with her, so he decided to carry her off. One day, as Persephone ran about in the meadow gathering flowers, she strayed away from her mother and the attending nymphs. Suddenly, the ground split open, and up from the yawning crevice came a dark chariot drawn by black horses. At the reins stood grim Hades. He seized the terrified girl, turned his horses, and plunged back into the ground. A herd of pigs rooting in the meadow tumbled into the cleft, and Persephone's cries for help died out as the ground closed again as suddenly as it had opened. Up in the field, a little swineherd stood and wept over the pigs he had lost, while Demeter rushed wildly about in the meadow, looking in vain for her daughter, who had vanished without leaving a trace. With the frightened girl in his arms, Hades raced his snorting horses down away from the sunlit world. Down and down they sped on the dark path to his dismal underground palace. There she is going through the crevice. He led weeping Persephone in, seated her beside him on a throne of black marble, and decked her with gold and precious stones. But the jewels brought her no joy. She wanted no cold stones. She longed for warm sunshine and flowers and her golden-tressed mother. Dead souls crowded out from cracks and crevices to look at their new queen, while ever more souls came across the river Styx, and Persephone watched them drink from a spring under dark poplars. It was the spring of Lethe, and those who drank from its waters forgot who they were and what they had done on earth. Rhadamanthus, a judge of the dead, dealt out punishment to the souls of great sinners. They were sentenced to suffer forever under the whips of the avenging Erinyes. Heroes were led to the Elysian fields, where they lived happily forever in never-failing light. Around the palace of Hades there was a garden where whispering poplars and weeping willows grew. They had no flowers and bore no fruit, and no birds sang in their branches. There was only one tree in the whole realm of Hades that bore fruit. That was a little pomegranate tree. The gardener of the underworld offered the tempting pomegranates to the queen, but Persephone refused to touch the food of the dead. Wordlessly, she walked through the garden at silent Hades' side, and slowly her heart turned to ice. Above, on earth, Demeter ran about searching for her lost daughter, and all nature grieved with her. Flowers wilted, trees lost their leaves, and the fields grew barren and cold. In vain did the plow cut through the icy ground. Nothing could sprout and nothing could grow, while the goddess of the harvest wept. People and animals starved, and the gods begged Demeter again to bless the earth, but she refused and let anything grow. Until she had found her daughter, she refused to let anything grow. Bent with grief, Demeter turned into a gray old woman. She returned to the meadow where Persephone had vanished and asked the sun if he had seen what had happened, but he said no. Dark clouds had hidden his face that day. She wandered around the meadow, and after a while she met a youth whose name was Triptolemus. He told her that his brother, a swineherd, had seen his pigs disappear into the ground and had heard the frightened screams of a girl. Demeter now understood that Hades had kidnapped her daughter, and her grief turned to anger. She called to Zeus and said that she would never again make the earth green if he did not command Hades to return Persephone. Zeus could not let the world perish, and he sent Hermes, here we're tying in Hermes, to Hades, bidding him to let Persephone go. Even Hades had to obey the orders of Zeus, and sadly he said farewell to his queen. Joyfully, Persephone leaped to her feet, but as she was leaving with Hermes, a hooting laugh came from the garden. There stood a gardener of Hades, grinning. He pointed to a pomegranate from which a few of the kernels were missing. Persephone, lost in thought, had eaten the seeds, he said. Then dark Hades smiled. He watched Hermes lead Persephone up to the bright world above. He knew that she must return to him, for she had tasted the food of the dead. When Persephone again appeared on earth, Demeter sprang to her feet with a cry of joy and rushed to greet her daughter. No longer was she a sad old woman, but a radiant goddess. Again she blessed her fields, and the flowers bloomed anew, and the grain ripened. "Dear child," she said, "never again shall we be parted. Together we shall make all nature bloom." But joy soon changed to sadness, for Persephone had to admit that she had tasted the food of the dead and must return to Hades. However, Zeus decided that mother and daughter should not be parted forever. He ruled that Persephone had to return to Hades and spend 1 month in the underworld for each seed she had eaten. Every year when Persephone left her, Demeter grieved. Nothing grew, and there was winter on earth. But as soon as her daughter's light footsteps were heard, the whole earth burst into bloom. Spring had come. As long as mother and daughter were together, the earth was warm and bore fruit. Demeter was a kind goddess. She did not want mankind to starve during the cold months of winter. When Persephone was away, she lent her chariot laden with grain to Triptolemus, the youth who had helped her to find her lost daughter. She told him to scatter her golden grain over the world and teach men how to sow it in spring and reap it in fall and store it away for the long months when again the earth was barren and cold. So there she is, being reunited, or maybe being pulled apart again. Who knows the difference? And legend has it that she ate 6 of the seeds, and that is why 6 months of the year we consider getting into the colder weather, late fall and winter, and then we get 6 months of spring and summer. Okay, let's see what there is in this weird but true books of the Greek myths about these gods. Since we just finished up Demeter, we'll go her first. There she is, god of the harvest. I thought this was really interesting. Once again, modern mythology strikes today. What does Demeter have to do with that bowl of Cheerios you had for breakfast this morning? Plenty! The word cereal comes from Ceres, the Roman name for Demeter. As the goddess of grain, Demeter is credited with the discovery of an ancient strain of wheat called spelt, and she taught others how to grow and harvest it, and eventually make cereal. So it's fitting that one of the world's favorite ways to start the day is named for this gifted goddess. Let's see what else we have here. We read about all that. Claim to fame, she taught humans about agriculture and created winter. Why she's weird, while searching for her daughter Persephone, she disguised herself as an old lady and claimed to have escaped from pirates. Never heard that one before. And the rest of it is pretty much what we read. That's their most famous story, is the one about Persephone being stolen away down to the underworld. But we do have a page on the underworld, Kingdom of the Dead. Some Greek people still place a coin underneath the tongue of their deceased loved one, a tradition believed to stem from the story about dead souls needing money to cross the river Styx, the central river of the underworld, by ferry. Those who couldn't pay had to wander around to find another entrance to Hades. So sending off a soul with a couple of coins could set him or her up for easier access to the underworld. Kingdom of the dead. Why it's weird. Hades, the name, means unseen, as it's a place where the dead go and are never to be seen again. Once a mortal died, their soul had to cross 5 rivers, representing sorrow, lamentation, fire, forgetfulness, and hate. The soul crossed the river by boat or found another entrance through a cave. Either way, it eventually made it to the gates of Hades. There it met the 3-headed dog Cerberus we talked about, bearing rows and rows of gnashing, sharp teeth. But he wasn't tasked with keeping the dead out. Rather, he attacked anyone who tried to leave. Once you were in Hades, there was absolutely no turning back, unless you were lucky enough to be reborn. So that's the fate that Persephone had part of the year. Okay, let's take a look at Hermes. His claim to fame is he passed along important messages between gods and mortals. Why he's weird, he created the first lyre, an instrument similar to a harp, out of a tortoise's shell, using stretched out sheep guts for the strings. That's what we just read about. As a brand new baby, he could walk and crawl and talk. We read about his stealing of the Apollo. If you want to dress up to be Hermes, you need a golden winged hat, winged sandals, a cape, and a staff, it says. So he related messages from Zeus to Demeter in trying to find her daughter and going down to get Persephone. And he stole the cows. Those are the 2 of his most famous stories. And I'll just show you their pictures in this other beautiful Greek mythology book by National Geographic. There is Demeter with her daughter Persephone. So Demeter is the one that has the throne on Olympus. Persephone is just her daughter that sits on her lap. She is not one of the main gods. And again, it talks about the seasons. And then we'll go to Hermes, messenger of the gods. And there he is again with his winged shoes and winged hat and his staff. This one doesn't show him with the cape. Trickster tales. Crafty Hermes plays naughty baby tricks, which we read about. Lots of mythological tricksters have babyish or animal ways. The British story of Peter Pan is about a boy who never grows up and plays all day. Many Native American stories tell of Coyote, a magical figure who gets involved in funny stories, but also often death stories. These tricksters do what they want without thinking about the effect on others. We laugh, but we also see what a mess life would be if we all did that. Huh. Okay, so that talks about Hermes and his famous stories that we already read. And I think that covers it for the books. So let's take a look at our printouts. So you could follow along in the book we read from. You can read more about Demeter online at the Duckster site, and then they give you a little quiz at the end. It's kind of fun to see how much you learned when you were doing your reading, and you can go to that same site and has information about Hermes in a quiz. There's a video telling its version of the story we read about the Demeter and Persephone, or this one about the trick Hermes played on Apollo. And this one's actually kind of interesting, the YouTube video, because it's a little bit different than the cow trick. It's a different trick. Some facts on Persephone can be looked up on this one website, and make some spring flowers in honor of the goddess of spring. Hopefully we can get a little spring around Pittsburgh here soon, but it is only February, so I think we're in for a few more weeks of winter, just like the groundhog said. And I do give you directions in the packet for making these paper flowers. And I made a sample one to show you because I think they're super easy and they turn out super cute. So really, if you follow along with the directions, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to cut a bunch of strips of paper and glue them into loops. And you cut out a yellow circle. It talks about using a circle paper punch. We don't need any circle paper punch. If that's not something you have laying around, then just cut a circle out of yellow paper. Or you can use orange or pink, whatever color you want yours to be. That's going to be the middle part of the flower. And you make all these loops out of the thin strips you want, or if you can make them a little bit thicker if you want. In that case, you might have to make your circle bigger so that they can glue to that. And you put your circle down on the paper and you glue the petals to it. And they suggest starting out, you do one going up, one going down, and one going to each side. And then you keep filling in and around there. And as soon as you get it looking the way you want, as full as you want, you tape a straw to the back. Green if you have it. If you don't, doesn't matter. Doesn't have to look like an actual stem. And you have a beautiful spring flower, and you can make a whole bouquet of these. And they're not very hard. You might have the hardest time with cutting the strips of paper, and it would be easier if you want them thin to have an adult involved. If you want them a little bit thicker, then you can probably do it on your own and just have a thicker looking flower. So it's entirely up to you. Whatever colors you want to do it, however you want to do it. But I thought it was a nice craft to make us think of spring and the flowers that burst forth whenever Demeter is happy and walking along on the earth. And then we have some word searches about spring. This one is not too hard, and it has 12 words to find in the flower pot. Or, if you want a little bit more of a challenge, a bigger one with, you've got 24 words here to find. As spring is a-coming. Persephone is going to come back up out of the world of the dead pretty soon. Or so they say. So, those are some activities to do along with the stories we read today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about some of these awesome Greek gods. And hopefully you will join us next time when we do 2 more gods. Not sure who they're going to be yet, but stay tuned and you will find out. Thanks for joining us today. Have fun with the activities and some of the videos that you can watch and some of the additional crafts you can make. And I will see you next time. This has been Miss Kathy from Shaler North Hills Library. Bye.